In a small town, a girl named Boksoon is known in their neighborhood as someone crazy for having unusual behavior and a childlike personality. She is rather slow and appears to have a developmental disability that forces her to act below her actual age. Nonetheless, she still has the skill to run a small vegetable stall beside the street in the public market. She always dreams of her late grandmother, who would tell her not to go to school anymore, but work hard instead and make money so she can support the needs of her younger sister, Yoon, who's currently attending a local high school. Her grandmother also taught her a song that she can sing whenever she misses her. She is woken up from her dream when a delivery man arrives, bringing her favorite dish, black bean noodles. Meanwhile, in an office, Boss John welcomes his nephew, Ik-sang, whom he called for a special meeting. Boss John starts by asking Ik-sang about the recent developments in his construction business. However, Ik-sang reveals that it has been a hard time for him since there are no new tenants to compensate for the expenses. Afterward, Boss John explains the reason why he called for Ik-sang's assistant. Boss John says that there is a girl in his factory who keeps causing trouble by starting protests and encouraging the other workers who were fired to do the same. Ik-sang cannot help but stare at the expensive-looking accessories his uncle is sporting, making him almost insecure and realize the financial gap. Boss John continues to explain. Earlier, he called the girl to have a conversation. He told her to stop, but she refused to listen. His finger reaches a red, dried stain on his table, and as he scratches it off the table, he calmly says that he slapped the girl multiple times. His face shows he only tasted regret when he realized what he had done. But it was only because he learned that the girl filmed the incident with her cell phone and threatened to spread it if he refuses to pay a price of $300,000. He then reaches down the side of his chair and lifts a large leather bag. He places the bag filled with cash on the table and says that Ik-sang is the only person he can trust to hand over the bag to the girl in exchange for the cell phone. Ik-sang is taken aback and almost cannot believe the amount of money in front of him. As Ik-sang walks toward the door, Boss John asks him if he is still keeping in touch with Tisu, Ik-sang's younger brother. However, Ik-sang confirms he hasn't. Boss John suspects that something is not right with Tisu since their father passed away mysteriously after he came. He then orders Ik-sang to keep his distance and not give his number to Tisu. However, instead of giving the money to the girl, Ik-sang meets with the members of a local gang to whom he is in debt and hands them over the money to pay off everything. Amidst the noise of the talking gang members, a flashback of his past reveals that he's at the hands of their father, who beat him almost every chance he got. His younger brother, Tisu, despite being so young, had been exposed to maltreatment and always offered to eliminate their own father for him. Ik-sang doubted that Tisu could, but at that time, Ik-sang witnessed the passing of their father from the pesticide Tisu laced in his drinks. The scene then shifts back to the current time. Tisu is now a grown man, living alone, far from his brothers. His current hobby is pottery, creating a collection of ceramic pieces in his underground workshop. Later that day, Tisu receives a call from Ik-sang asking to meet him in a bar to ask for help with the girl who has the phone. Since Ik-sang spent the money that was meant for the girl, he has no other choice. He resorts to asking a favor from Tisu in desperation, though he knows he cannot mess with his psychotic brother. Ik-sang asks Tisu to get the phone from the girl, telling him to do it for him, while lying that the girl intentionally took photos to blackmail people. However, Tisu seems unimpressed with Ik-sang not keeping in touch for the last 5 years, but then all of a sudden deciding to ask him for a favor. Ik-sang apologizes and complains about the noise coming from the nearby table. With a sly grin on his face, Tisu calmly asks Ik-sang if he wants him to finish them off. When he receives no direct response from Ik-sang, Tisu then shouts at them for being loud, causing them to abruptly stop when they hear him. Surprised, the man from the other table stares at them, and Ik-sang immediately apologizes on behalf of his brother. However, the man refuses to acknowledge the apology and walks toward Tisu. When the man touches his shoulder, Tisu uses a chopstick to swiftly stab the man's arm before pushing the chopstick through his chin with bare hands, causing him to land on the floor, gasping for breath. In the next scene, Tisu slides a paper bag full of money to Ik-sang for their mother's vitamin. A quick camera shift to the entirety of the bar reveals that everyone else except the two of them is beaten badly. The next morning, Yeonhee, the girl who possesses the phone, promises her younger sister, Na-rai, that she will soon buy a house of their own using the money Boss John was supposed to give her in exchange for the evidence. A few moments later, Tisu knocks on their gate and demands Yeonhee hand over the phone. However, when Yeonhee learns that Tisu came without the money, she refuses to give in to his demands. Though Tisu is shocked to learn about the money, which Ik-sang intentionally kept from him, he still insists on finishing the task, despite having to use force. He warns Yeonhee that she will soon meet her demise if she refuses to yield. When she closes the gate in his face, Tisu jumps over the wall and then proceeds to murder Yeonhee while Na-rai washes the dishes. The noise startles Na-rai, and when she checks the other room, she sees Tisu standing next to the deceased body of her sister. That night, Tisu calls Ik-sang while driving back to his house, asking about the money. Ik-sang admits that he took the money to pay for his son's studies, also partly because he learned that his wife works at a hostess bar. Since Ik-sang caused all the trouble from his incompetencies, Tisu demands he meet him at his house, where he parks his car. He took Na-rai with him, After pouring himself a glass of wine, he offers Na Rai a chance to escape. She can run away until he's done drinking. And if she asks people for help, he will eliminate them too. Fuels her tears, which fall over her cheeks as she listens to what he says. Confident in himself, Tisu gives a piece of advice to her: find someone stronger than him, someone whom he cannot finish. Despite fear trying to undermine her spirit, Na Rai's will to survive propels her feet to take the chance while she still has one. She doesn't even notice how dark it is outside, for it is not ghosts who she should fear, but a man trying to take her life. After what seems to be an endless scurry through the woods, Na Rai finds herself in front of Boksoon and Yoon Young's house. They welcome her inside the house, and then offer her a seat at their dinner table. When asked about her family, Na Rai cannot utter a single word due to shock. They then let her spend the night with them, before taking her with them to go to the police the next morning. Boksoon left something at the house, so she goes back, leaving Na Rai with Yoon Young. However, while she's gone, Tisu appears, putting Na Rai in a state of shock, as if she was poured over a bucket of cold water. When Boksoon returns, Yoon Young and Na Rai are nowhere to be found. Only Yoon Young's backpack is left on the ground. As she attempts to pick it up, she suddenly hears a distant scream and frantically dashes into the forest. There, Yoon Young is being dragged across the ground. As she cries for help, Boksoon wastes no time to search for her. Trapped in a chokehold, Yoon Young tries to fight back, but strength has already left her body. As she breathes her last, the last thing she sees is Boksoon approaching fast to save her. With all her might, Boksoon grabs a stone and jumps over Tisu before smacking him with the stone. Yoon Young's lifeless body falls to the ground. Desperate for a little chance to save her sister, Boksoon carries Yoon Young out of the forest before laying her under a tree to call for help. However, Tisu finds Yoon Young in no time, and when Boksoon returns with the police, she cannot find Yoon Young anymore. Meanwhile, Ik-sang drives to meet Tisu, but before that, he hires a man using the money Tisu gave him to accompany him in case something happened. Tisu arrives and informs Ik-sang about Na Rai, and how he failed to capture her, including being unable to get a hold of the cell phone. This pisses off Ik-sang. Not only did they risk getting caught by the police if Na Rai manages to find help, but also the fact that he has to give the phone to Boss John. In frustration, he kicks the center table, and the noise created prompts the man he hired to kick the door open. Tisu is initially shocked, and immediately asks for Ik-sang's explanation, fully knowing that no one is allowed in there. It then takes him no time to realize that Ik-sang is actually afraid of him. A fight ensues. The hired man proves his combat skills by displaying equal strength to Tisu's. As the fight continues, Ik-sang walks out of the house with confidence that his brother will soon face his demise. And if so, he plans to use the furnace in Tisu's workshop to burn his body. The hired man initially takes the upper hand, but Tisu manages to turn the tables by stabbing him with a chopstick, taking advantage of the situation to bring the fight into his favor. The fight ends up brutal, with only Tisu left standing. Ik-sang witnesses how Tisu stabs the man's head. He then rushes back to his car and trying to escape the bloody hands of his brother. However, the car won't start. As Tisu steps out of the house, Ik-sang desperately goes through the toolbox in his trunk to find anything he can use to defend himself. He grabs a wrench and then attempts to attack Tisu, but the latter catches his hand in midair. To his surprise, Tisu acts like nothing happened and starts to demand dinner with their mother. As Tisu walks away to clean up, Ik-sang slumps to the ground in relief, while gasping for air to breathe. Meanwhile, Boksoon consults a local granny to help find her sister. According to the granny, Yoon Young is in the mountains. When she follows Granny's advice, she finds herself crying toward Yoon Young. However, Yoon Young tells her she's already gone. Boksoon is jolted back to reality. She was dreaming. She immediately goes outside, and to her surprise, Na Rai is in front of their house. Crying, she frantically asks about Yoon Young's whereabouts. When Na Rai cannot say anything, she begins to believe that Tisu is Na Rai's father, who has come to get her. She then yells at Na Rai to tell her the truth, causing Na Rai to eventually reveal that she was only given the chance to escape after her sister was murdered. Boksoon is taken aback and asks Na Rai to tell her where to find Tisu before mourning the realization that Yoon Young has already passed away. Unbeknownst to them, Yoon Young's body is being turned into ashes in Tisu's furnace. Turns out that he infuses his pottery with the ashes of his victims. Dozens of them are already displayed in his workshop, and his recent creation is Yoon Young. Boksoon comes up with a plan to get revenge, lace Tisu's drink with poison, which she got from the same granny earlier. That same night, Boksoon and Na Rai begin their practice, in case they get into a fight with Tisu. The next morning, equipped with a knife, a bundle of money, and the determination to put Tisu to justice, Boksoon and Na Rai begin their trek to Tisu's house. After hours of walking, Boksoon begins to feel frustrated. Na Rai then reveals that she actually cannot recall the exact location of Tisu's house, and she was lying all along. She then apologizes. But Boksoon isn't able to handle her emotions, so she starts hitting Na Rai with a stick, while blaming her for Yoon Young's passing. When they finally calm down, they apologize to each other, crying. Meanwhile, Tisu is at their house, tracking them down. After continuing the search, they manage to find Tisu's house in the middle of the woods. Boksoon immediately tries to find an entrance, and sneaks into the house through a left-open window, while Na Rai stays outside to serve as a lookout. Boksoon then searches the house and finds the entrance to the basement workshop. She decides to venture into the workshop, where she sees dozens of ceramic vases perfectly lined up in the shelves, each with a corresponding nameplate of the victim. She then sees Yoon-young's nameplate and puts it inside her bag, before turning her attention to the huge kiln. Unbeknownst to her, Tisu is on his way back to the house. Inside the kiln is Yoon-young's remains. Boksoon tries to touch it, but while doing so, Na-rai warns her that Tisu is coming. She immediately grabs a water bottle from the fridge and laces it with poison before Tisu can enter the house. However, Tisu senses their presence and catches Na-rai peeking outside the house. Na-rai tries to run and hide herself, to no avail. She is then taken back to the house. Tisu plans to turn her body into ashes like her sister, but to save herself, Na-rai reveals that she knows the whereabouts of the phone. Tisu immediately informs Ik-sang before driving to the city. Unbeknownst to him, Na-rai manages to inform Boksoon, who then sprints back to town. Na-rai leads Tisu to a locker that holds the phone, just as Boksoon arrives in the city and desperately asks everyone about Na-rai. Meanwhile, Tisu meets with Ik-sang and hands over the phone, but demands they spend the night with a family dinner together with their mom. Ik-sang refuses, and insists they do it next time. He then gives Tisu a warm embrace before stepping into his car. Before he can start the engine, Tisu asks once again. Ik-sang apologizes, but Tisu has already had enough. He uses his elbows to break the car window, allowing Na-rai to escape from his grasp. Just then, Na-rai hears Boksoon's voice calling out to her. She sees Boksoon on the other side of the road. Without hesitation, she dashes through cars passing by to reunite with Boksoon. Tisu notices that Na-rai has escaped and starts chasing after them across the city. In his car, Ik-sang watches the footage. It is revealed that Boss Jeon pressured Yeon-hee to sign an agreement. Each slap costs $1,000. Due to financial hardships, Yeon-hee accepts the offer and Boss Jeon proceeds to assault her. Ik-sang then receives a call from Boss Jeon asking about the phone. He then asks Boss Jeon to come to his mother's shop to talk. Boss Jeon refuses, but Ik-sang reveals that he knows what's in the video, forcing Boss Jeon to agree. Throughout the night, Boksoon and Na-rai try to find the police station while Tisu searches for them. Meanwhile, Ik-sang arrives at the shop to meet their mother, Kyung-ya, but when he enters the shop, he is greeted by Gwang-soo, the man who introduced him to the man for hire. Gwang-soo asks about what happened to the hired man, but Ik-sang refuses to say anything, prompting Gwang-soo to yell at him. Instead of telling the truth, Ik-sang shifts the conversation by saying that he needs help. He is planning to take down his brother, Tisu. In the middle of the city, hunger starts to weigh Boksoon down, and she refuses to continue. Na-rai tries to convince her, but Boksoon cries in frustration. She's never been this hungry her entire life, so Na-rai decides she will go alone to find something to eat. Thankfully, she finds food. She then rushes back to Boksoon, but the latter is nowhere to be found. When all hope seems lost, Boksoon calls out to her. Turns out she wandered off to find Na-rai. They exchange heartfelt talks, crying and promising each other they will never split up again. While Boksoon and Na-rai enjoy the feast, Tisu finds Boksoon's bag. He then receives a call from Ik-sang telling him to come over to their mother's shop so they can enjoy some drinks together. Tisu is a little hesitant at first, but when Kyung-ya tells him he's still a part of their family and she really wants to see him, he eventually agrees. Unbeknownst to him, Ik-sang plans with Gwang-soo's men the way they are going to end his life. Back on the streets, Boksoon and Na-rai happily talk about their lives when Boksoon suddenly stops. Her face is painted in fear as she meets the gaze of their pursuer, Tisu. The rain starts pouring, causing a terrible memory to flash back before her eyes, Yoon-young lifeless in the hands of the man in front of them. As they spot the police station across the street, the race for their lives begins. They run directly to the nearby police station, and luckily manage to get in before Tisu catches them. Tisu then leaves with a grin on his face. When they think that they are saved, they are greeted by the chaotic and senseless atmosphere inside the station. They sit for a while to wait, but they end up falling asleep. Suddenly, Boksoon feels nauseous, and she walks away toward the comfort room. However, she is unaware that Tisu has already made it inside the station and is sitting beside the sleeping Na-rai. When Boksoon returns, only the note from Tisu is left for her, telling her to come to the written address. Meanwhile, Tisu arrives at Kyung-ya's shop and they start sharing food and drinks. When Kyung-ya has drunk too much, she reveals that Tisu is not her biological son, but was left at their doorstep. She confesses how she really sees Tisu, a weird kid that was brought to her, and how she regrets having taken him in. Tisu then whispers in her ear that the men behind him appear unusually quiet, arousing his suspicions that he was set up. He then makes quick work of the men, taking them down in a flash with ease, before sitting in between Ik-sang and Kyung-ya. When he asks them what's going to happen next, Kyung-ya suddenly switches sides and blames Ik-sang. She then starts spitting nonsense about how Tisu was always good to them. Tisu cannot help but laugh, prompting Kyung-ya and Ik-sang to join him in fear. All of a sudden, Gwang-soo strikes Tisu and continues multiple times, until blood starts gushing out of his head. Turns out Gwang-soo did not suffer from a fatal blow earlier. To dispose of Tisu's body, Ik-sang and Gwang-soo open the trunk, only to see Na-rai. They decide to take her inside the shop. Kyung-ya, who is fond of taking care of abandoned children, like Tisu, offers food to Na-rai. But still in shock, Na-rai cannot bring herself to eat. When Ik-sang has finally had enough, he tells Na-rai to go, but Kyung-ya stops him. She wants to raise Na Rai as her own, the way she took Tisu to her roof. Ik-sang is strongly against the idea, fully knowing that this is exactly what Kyung-ya did the first time. Meanwhile, Boksoon faces another problem. When the cab driver refuses to take her to the shop when she reveals that she has nothing to pay for the ride, the driver finally concedes when she pleads that she needs to protect Na Rai. Back at the shop, Gwang-soo suddenly falls to the ground, his mouth bubbling with blood. He eventually succumbs to his injury. Just as Kyung-ya and Ik-sang panic, Tisu shockingly shows up covered in blood at their doorstep. He then turns off the lights and walks inside as he closes the door behind him. Ik-sang and Kyung-ya cannot hide their fears. Their eyes and bodies show how much they are afraid of Tisu. In her ragged breathing, Kyung-ya asks Tisu to smile, and he does so. They think they managed to fool Tisu again. However, they are only alive because Tisu wishes it. That night, somehow, is different. Tisu suddenly grabs a bone and starts pounding Ik-sang's head. Kyung-ya tries to stop him. Despite having the chance to finally escape, Na Rai cannot take even a small step to get out of the place. She closes her eyes in hopes that they will eventually go away. After hitting Ik-sang to his demise, Tisu turns his attention to Kyung-ya, whose pleas are not enough to stop him. Even from a view outside the shop, Tisu's hostility is brimming in his eyes. He's ending the lives of the people who once considered him as family. Afterward, he turns his attention to Na Rai, just as Boksoon arrives. Boksoon frantically searches for the shop, and each second that passes by, the smaller the chance she can get to save Na Rai, who's trapped in Tisu's hands. A single tear falls over Na Rai's cheeks as she slowly starts. Boksoon arrives and storms into the shop, before stabbing Tisu with her knife. However, Tisu still finds the strength to swat her across the room. He then slowly falls to the floor, fighting for his life, while Boksoon crawls toward Na Rai. She promises to finish off Tisu on her own. Tisu finally pulls the knife, and still manages to stand despite his injury. Boksoon turns her attention to him and smudges her face with the blood on the floor, yelling before attacking Tisu. Even heavily injured, Tisu still has enough strength to fight Boksoon. He manages to hold his own against her. He starts pounding his fist on her face before slamming her onto the table, while fighting his injuries to stay alive. At one point, Boksoon finds the chance to take down Tisu. They start rolling on the floor while trying to choke each other. Boksoon's will and unwavering spirit allow her to overpower Tisu, who this time fails to recover from Boksoon's chokehold. He eventually breathes his last, with eyes wide open. As the camera pans outside the shop, only Boksoon's screams can be heard, along with the sound of the rain. Boksoon then crawls back to Na Rai and embraces her. All of a sudden, Na Rai touches her back, causing her to stop crying in shock. Turns out that Na Rai is still alive. While they cry in relief, Boss John appears at the doorstep. When he turns on the lights, his mouth hangs wide open as he sees the bloody scene. However, his reputation is the only thing he cares about. After all, everything happened because of him. He orders Boksoon to hand over the phone, which she obeys. Later, the police discover the gruesome scene at the restaurant, as the news indicates. After the incident, Boksoon returns to their town, and is now living with Na Rai, whom she raises as her own sister. They also receive justice for the passing of their sisters, and everyone else who fell victim to Tisu's hands. His house was raided by police and the remains of the victims were successfully recovered. That is, thanks to Boksoon's determination and unconditional love for the people she considers as family. However, after everything, the man who brought chaos into their lives is still sitting in his office, free from any charges, after successfully recovering the phone that was the root of all.